I guess I was in third grade. My dad arranged for me to get an airplane ride with the principal of the high school at the town where I grew up in, Curtis, Nebraska. And after that time, I was pretty much hooked on becoming a pilot, and that's what I wanted to do, you know. So from there on, everything I did, you know, was about flying. And I wanted to start flying when I was 14 because I knew you could fly gliders when you're 14. And I went to this airport, and the guy down there really didn't want to teach any kids how to fly gliders. So even though they had a glider club there and they did a lot of glider flying, so I waited until I was 16 because at 16 you can fly airplanes with engines on it. So I went back down there, and he still didn't want to teach me how to fly airplanes either at 16. So then I went to North Platte, and when I got to North Platte, they were more than happy to teach me how to fly. So I started flying when I was 16. I got my license. I had to wait until I turned 17 to get my license. So actually, I soloed it must have been May of 1975, but I had to wait until my birthday in August to get my license. So I finally got my license, and then while I was in high school, I was able to go ahead and take the afternoons off to work on getting my commercial license. So by the time I graduated from high school, I had a commercial license, but I really wanted to get into helicopters. And at the time, there's a helicopter operator in Kearney, and I went over there and talked to him. He said, "Well, you need to do this or this, you know, to get into flying helicopters. And one of the best things, you know, is if you go ahead and get a mechanic's license." So I went ahead and thought, well, that sounds like a good idea, because helicopters at the time, you know, required a lot of maintenance, and usually if they're going to hire you to fly a helicopter, they also wanted to maybe get some extra use out of you by working on the helicopter too until you build up more flight time. So I went to school at Sidney, Nebraska, and got my A&P license, and which was a good move, because it's helped it a lot on understanding the aircraft a lot better, and being able to keep them flying too. After doing that, then I went and started being an aircraft mechanic while I was kind of building up the money to start helicopter flying. And I realized it was going to be pretty expensive to become a helicopter pilot, so I heard, you know, I could do it through the National Guard. So I joined the National Guard, and actually I was in the National Guard for 10 years in Lincoln, flying small helicopters, and I really enjoyed, you know, my time in the Guard. And a lot of the people that I was in the Guard with, I actually fly with now for the company I work for. So it was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed it. And plus, I got some really good training. Well, there are definitely a lot more airplane pilots than helicopter pilots. I mean, the military doesn't train very many helicopter pilots anymore. It's very expensive to become a helicopter pilot, and up until now, I mean, the pay for helicopter pilots wasn't near as good. I mean, if you went to work for the airlines, so most people, if they really wanted to make a career, they wanted to go ahead and work for the airlines. And still, I mean, if you get a job working for the airlines, you can make 3 times what I make as a helicopter pilot. But I really love the helicopter flying. I mean, having a helicopter is like basically having a magic carpet. I mean, because you can just float or hover around, and you can go from here to there, wherever you want to go. I mean, if you see some place on the ground you want to land, most places, you know, I mean, you can actually land there. I mean, I was down in Houston last month, and we were going out and going to fancy restaurants and landing the helicopter in the parking lot, you know, down in Houston. And so, I mean, that's pretty neat. So the freedom you have with a helicopter is nice. Now, helicopters are noisy, they vibrate, stuff like that, and they're expensive. So that's kind of a drawback of a helicopter, but, you know, the freedom of being able to move around is nice. Now, I also fly airplanes, I fly gliders, and I fly hang gliders and other stuff like that too. And so I guess I have a pretty broad, you know, range of different airplanes I fly. I fly float planes, and all of them are fun, and they all have their place, you know, but I still enjoy, you know, doing my helicopter flying the most. And right now, the way it is, you know, with all the Vietnam pilots, you know, becoming, you know, in their 50s or almost 60, you know, the demand for helicopter pilots the next 10 years is going to triple. It used to be, you know, the pay was fairly low. I would say, you know, you'd start out in the $30,000 range, but now you're looking at starting out about $55,000 to $60,000, depending on where you're at. Some areas you might actually pay about $75,000, but you're going to be looking at in the $50,000 range starting out as a pilot. And most companies have a pretty good pay scale, so that you can expect anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 pay increase every year. And of course, that'll always, you know, be adjusted as cost of living changes too, you know. But you know, the benefits are better. Your time off is, for a job like this, I think the time off is great. I mean, I work 7 days, 12 hours a day, and then I get 7 days off. And then you do build up vacation time. But you can work with other pilots, and also then if you use up your vacation time, I mean, if you can work it out to where you can have easily 14 days off, where you only have to use 7 days of your vacation time. So I mean, those are nice benefits. And now, nice thing about the EMS stuff here is that some aviation jobs, what you'll do is you'll take off, you'll fly somewhere, and then you'll sit there all day waiting for your passengers, to get done with their business. Then you'll get back in the airplane and you'll fly back. We're pretty much oriented at getting back here to our base. And so when we take off, our goal is to get back to our base as fast as we can. And we want to get to the hospital, take care of the patient, but we want to get back to this area so we can service it. And then we sit here. So I mean, it's not like you're sitting at a strange airport a long ways from home. You're at your base location. Now here, you can do other things if you have some paperwork you need to do, or a couple little projects. You can do those right here. While we're waiting and resting and waiting for another flight to go on. One thing. I mean, we're a team. I mean, I'm the pilot, and we have a nurse and a paramedic, and we all work together as a team. And so if you think of it as a team, and everything that you do is going to help them out, and they're going to help you out, then it makes things a lot better. I mean, because if you don't want to work together, then you start butting heads, and then everybody just gets kind of growly and stuff. But if you work together, it just makes everything more pleasant, and it just makes things a lot nicer environment to be working in. One thing, when I was in school, especially during grade school and stuff like that, I had my head in the clouds. I think a lot of the times just thinking about other things, and then finally when I did realize that, hey, I better get better at math, stuff like that, because I wanted to fly. The math is important. That's definitely true. My spelling's still really bad, and it's a good thing you don't have to spell very good to be a pilot. And the math's not anything that really great. Actually, I needed more math to be an aircraft mechanic than I do as a pilot. But there's certain aspects of math that you need, the basic stuff you still need to be able to know, and there's a lot of physics that on this helicopter that I didn't pay a lot of attention in class then, but now I can see how all that stuff I learned in physics actually takes place when flying that helicopter, and what keeps that helicopter flying is a lot of physics. So those guys that designed it, they had to know their physics pretty well. We try not to be really involved on the medical side. Actually, we don't even want to know what kind of patient we're going to transport until actually we're lifting. We don't want that to have any decision on our taking the flight or not. When we get a call to take a flight, if we know that the weather's good, then they'll already go ahead and dispatch us on the flight. Now, if we have a day when the weather could be kind of iffy, then we give them a status that we need to check the weather before we can accept the flight. And so what they'll do is they'll page the flight out pending the weather, and I'll go ahead and check the weather, see what the weather looks like, and then determine if I can make the flight. Like yesterday, we had a thunderstorm. It was really strong in Omaha. We had some weather out west, and I had to determine whether we were going to get any more thunderstorms, or whether the thunderstorm possibility had already passed us and now was in the Omaha area, because I had to go up to Sioux Falls. And that's a skill that you learn from flying, and when you're in flight school, you learn the basics of weather. And then as you fly and you kind of get more and more aware of it, you learn how to interpret the weather better and read the weather charts and know how the weather is going to react. Plus, now for me, I've lived in Nebraska all my life, and that kind of helps a little bit too. Even though the weather changes a lot, you kind of have a trend on how it might change. One of the biggest things, I mean, if a person wants to get into flying, I mean, it doesn't make any difference what you want to fly or anything like that. The thing is, using drug and alcohol, that can end a career rapidly. A friend of mine, his son wanted to get into the Navy and fly, and then maybe go on to be a commercial airline pilot. He got picked up once for DUI, and that in itself is very bad. But then he got picked up the second time for DUI, and that took away his medical. So now he can never fly again. And so the first time, if you go through enough steps, you can prove that you're not going to drink, you're not going to drive, and all that stuff. They'll give you your medical back. But the second time, then you're done. But if you do drugs, I mean, you're done for right off the bat. So I mean, if you want to do it, drugs and alcohol is definitely something you want to stay away from. I've been doing this for 7 years, and you see all different kinds of things. In one of my, flights, it was the shortest one, but probably the most important, was that flying down there and landing, you know, and getting the guy out of the river. I mean, he was only 3 miles from the hospital, but that was at a time when the river was flooding and they couldn't get to him. So there's no way they could get him across the river to an ambulance. So we went ahead and went in there. We were going to land on a sandbar. Unfortunately, the sandbar, you know, wouldn't support the weight of the helicopter that I had. And so I instructed the guys on the ground. They had some chainsaws. They cut down some trees and made a clearing for me. And then I landed there. I had to keep the helicopter still powered up and almost hovering while they loaded him because it still was pretty soft and the ground wasn't very stable. We loaded him in, and then it was just a 3-minute flight to the hospital, but probably saved the guy's life because he had a very major blockage and he couldn't have survived much longer. I like the people, you know, you work with. I like, you know, most of them, I mean, just because of the type of job it is, the personalities are always kind of fun to be around. I like the hours we have in the schedule, and I love flying helicopters.